Boston, 1962, a city gripped by fear. One man, or perhaps more, was stalking the streets, leaving a chilling pattern of death behind. The Boston Strangler. Tonight's clue to uncover: how many of the murders were definitively linked to the same suspect? Let the shadows speak. Between 1962 and 1964, 13 women were brutally murdered in the Boston area. The press dubbed him the Boston Strangler. All victims were found in their homes. Most had been sexually assaulted and strangled with their own belongings. The killer's identity would remain under fierce debate. It began on June 14th, 1962. Anna Sleezers, age 55, was found dead in her Boston apartment by her son. Her body lay across the bathtub, a belt tightly knotted around her neck. The room was untouched. No sign of forced entry. Within weeks, 2 more women were found: Mary Mullen and Nina Nichols, then Helen Blake and Ida Erga. All older women, all strangled, all in their homes. Some had been assaulted, others posed grotesquely, with objects arranged around or inside the body. The similarities were unmistakable, but so were the differences. Police struggled to connect the dots. And Boston, a city once proud of its safety, began to tremble. Women stayed indoors. Locksmiths saw business triple overnight. And the media fed a growing panic. Authorities publicly denied that a serial killer was at large. But internally, fear of a serial predator intensified. A special task force was formed. Detectives began combing neighborhoods for leads, but the killer always seemed one step ahead. Each crime, meticulously executed. Each victim, silenced. And so the city waited, as bodies continued to appear. With only the killer, knowing who would be next. The victims of the Boston Strangler were not just statistics. They were mothers, daughters, grandmothers. Each with a life, a story, a name. Anna Sleezers, age 55, a Latvian immigrant, deeply religious, known for her quiet strength. She had just asked her son to pick her up for church. He arrived to find her lifeless. Mary Mullen, age 85, suffered a heart attack, initially not ruled a homicide. Only later was her death reconsidered, under suspicious circumstances. Her body bore no signs of assault, but her case was re-examined in the growing pattern. Nina Nichols, 68, was a retired physiotherapist, found on her bedroom floor. Her stockings twisted around her neck like a grim signature. Helen Blake, 65, known in her community for charity work, was discovered with multiple ligatures tied intricately around her neck. The level of control was chilling. Ida Erga, Jean Sullivan, Evelyn Corbin, Jane Sullivan, Mary Brown. The ages varied, from as young as 19 to as old as 85. Some were sexually assaulted, some were not. Some were posed, some left untouched. This inconsistency kept law enforcement divided. Was it one killer evolving, or several imitators? The victims only shared detail. They lived alone. They were women. They were vulnerable. And they were targeted in the silence of their own homes. From early on, police chased countless leads. But one man would come to define the case: Albert DeSalvo, a factory worker and military veteran, married, with children. And yet, harboring a violent past. DeSalvo was arrested in 1964, not for murder, but for a string of sexual assaults where he posed as a modeling agent. He confessed to being the Boston Strangler, describing crime scenes with eerie accuracy, claiming responsibility for 13 murders, but his confession came without physical evidence, and his story shifted over time. There were inconsistencies, names he got wrong, crime scene details he reversed, and no fingerprints, no DNA to place him definitively at the scenes. Others believed DeSalvo wanted attention, or hoped for leniency in exchange for his confession. Some investigators never believed he acted alone, or at all. George Nassar, a fellow inmate and convicted murderer, was suspected by some to have manipulated DeSalvo into taking credit. There were also whispers of a broader conspiracy, multiple killers, working independently or perhaps together, feeding off a climate of fear. Despite confessing, DeSalvo was never tried for the murders. He was imprisoned for the assaults. And in 1973, he was stabbed to death in his cell. Just as DNA testing was beginning to change forensic science forever, the truth died with him, or so it seemed. The pattern began to emerge slowly, then with terrifying clarity. Between June of 1962 and January of 1964, at least 13 women were found murdered in and around Boston. Most were strangled. Most had no signs of forced entry. Many were sexually assaulted, and all were killed in the supposed safety of their own homes. Anna Sleezer's was found on June 14, 1962. A white cord from her bathrobe wrapped tightly around her neck, tied in a bow. Her body carefully laid across the bathtub, her house otherwise undisturbed. Just 2 weeks later, the killer struck again. Nina Nichols, 68, was found on her bedroom floor. A nylon stocking twisted around her neck. Drawers had been pulled open, but nothing appeared stolen. Helen Blake, 65, discovered with her bra and stockings looped around her neck in a pattern of strangulation that forensic pathologists later described as ritualistic. Her body was partially nude. Scratches on her skin suggested a violent struggle, but also precision. Each victim had items tied in complex knots: scarves, belts, nylon hosiery. The killer's calling card was the ligature, always using what was already in the room, always tied into a macabre bow. Some scenes showed extreme violence. Jane Sullivan was found half submerged in her bathtub, the water long gone cold, her body decomposed. Mary Brown was discovered days after neighbors noticed a smell seeping through the walls. There were signs of sexual assault in many cases, yet not all. Victims ranged from young women in their late teens to elderly women in their 80s. The killer never forced entry. Some victims had just returned from shopping. Others had been reading, cooking, or even getting dressed. Investigators believed the strangler either talked his way inside or had been allowed in by unsuspecting victims. Some theorized he posed as a handyman or a city inspector, or simply knocked and asked for help. The timing of the murders varied. Some occurred during the day, others in the early evening. There was no single neighborhood, no consistent age range, no definitive sexual motivation. It was this inconsistency that puzzled authorities most. Even the methods shifted. One victim had a pillowcase over her head. Another was stabbed. Yet all bore that haunting similarity: strangulation using fabric from the home. By early 1964, the murders appeared to stop, abruptly. No explanation, no clear arrest. Just silence. Some believed the killer had died or moved. Others thought someone had been quietly removed from the streets. But the city of Boston remained uneasy. 13 women had died under eerily similar circumstances, and no one had truly been brought to justice. The bow-tied ligatures, the undisturbed homes, the ease with which the killer entered and exited, all painted a portrait of someone calculating, calm, and deeply disturbed. To this day, not all of the crimes attributed to the Boston Strangler have been definitively connected, leaving behind more questions than answers. As fear spread across Boston, law enforcement mobilized one of the largest manhunts in the city's history. A special task force was assembled, combining detectives from the Boston Police Department, the Massachusetts State Police, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Their mission was clear, but the path forward, murky. Over 1,000 individuals were questioned. Officers knocked on doors, followed up on tips, and circulated composite sketches. Undercover officers posed as electricians and building inspectors, hoping to bait the killer into revealing himself. But the leads were overwhelming and often contradictory. Police developed a psychological profile, suggesting the killer was likely white, in his late 20s to early 30s, and had a background in maintenance or repair work. The profile helped narrow searches, but no clear suspect emerged. And with every month that passed, the killer grew bolder, while the trail grew colder. The early 1960s were an era before forensic science had evolved into the precise tool it is today. Crime scene investigators lacked access to DNA testing, and their tools were limited to fingerprint dusting, blood typing, and basic fiber analysis. At multiple scenes, investigators collected hair strands, partial prints, and fibers. But contamination was a constant issue. Evidence was often handled without gloves, bagged improperly, or logged with vague descriptions. In several cases, the killer had wiped down surfaces, leaving little behind. Decades later, in the early 2000s, the Massachusetts Attorney General ordered a forensic re-examination of several cases using DNA technology. In the year 2013, a major breakthrough came. DNA recovered from the final victim, Mary Sullivan, matched the genetic profile of Albert DeSalvo through a sample taken from his nephew. It was the first and only murder conclusively linked to him through forensic science. And it came 50 years too late. As the murders continued, fear settled deep into the fabric of daily life in Boston. Women refused to leave their homes after dark. Locks were changed, deadbolts installed. Sales of guard dogs and mace surged. Apartment buildings once left unlocked became fortresses. Community meetings were held, curfews quietly observed, and a quiet suspicion grew among neighbors. Some women took self-defense classes. Others left town entirely. Rumors swirled about who the killer could be. A neighbor, a mailman, a trusted friend. Trust had vanished. Even after the killing stopped, the fear lingered. Long after the footsteps faded, the silence remained loud. The press dubbed him the Boston Strangler, and the name stuck. Headlines screamed from every corner of the city. Serial killer stalks Boston. Strangler claims another victim. Reporters flooded crime scenes, often arriving before police tape was even drawn. Some outlets published graphic details, fueling panic and speculation. The lack of official updates led journalists to fill in the blanks, sometimes recklessly. False confessions made headlines. So did conspiracy theories. The media's obsession may have helped pressure law enforcement to act, but it also made the city a stage where terror and misinformation took center spotlight. Despite Albert DeSalvo's confession, many remained unconvinced he acted alone, or at all. He had described crime scenes with alarming detail, but he also made key errors, confusing victim names, dates, and apartment layouts. Some detectives believed he was coached, others believed he was a pathological liar, seeking fame from infamy. George Nassar, a violent inmate and self-proclaimed genius, was rumored to have encouraged DeSalvo to confess, allegedly in exchange for sharing book profits. Several medical experts and criminologists argued that the inconsistencies in the victims' ages, the varying methods of assault, and the different crime scene signatures pointed not to one killer, but to many. To this day, the idea of multiple Boston Stranglers remains a dominant theory. Was it one man, evolving over time, or several men, capitalizing on the chaos? No definitive answer has ever been confirmed. Albert DeSalvo was never tried for murder. Instead, he was convicted in 1967 for a series of unrelated sexual assaults, dubbed the Green Man crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison. In interviews, DeSalvo claimed he wanted his family to receive reward money, allegedly one of the reasons he confessed in the year 1973. DeSalvo was found stabbed to death in his prison cell. The case remains unsolved. With DeSalvo's death and no trial for the murders, the Boston Strangler case drifted into ambiguity. In the year 2013, DNA linked DeSalvo to the murder of Mary Sullivan, one of the 13 canonical victims. But no forensic evidence connected him to the others. No other suspect was ever charged. And legally, the case remains open. The case of the Boston Strangler continues to haunt us, leaving more questions than answers. Was Albert DeSalvo truly the lone killer? Or were there others, possibly working together, manipulating the panic? Why did the murder stop so abruptly in 1964? And could there have been more victims whose stories were never uncovered? The lack of concrete evidence, especially as DNA testing only confirmed his connection to one murder, raises doubts. Was the true culprit ever caught, or did the killer walk free? The mystery endures, shrouded in uncertainty and chilling possibility. The Boston Strangler case cast a dark shadow over the city, instilling fear that reverberated through the nation. The media frenzy fueled public hysteria, transforming every woman in Boston into a potential victim. In the absence of justice, trust in law enforcement eroded, and the city's sense of safety was forever shaken. Families, neighborhoods, and businesses were left to rebuild in a climate of fear. The investigation influenced modern criminology, pushing for the use of DNA technology to solve cold cases. Yet, for many, the mystery remains unsolved, leaving Boston's legacy tied to this grim chapter of history. Now, what do you think happened in the case of the Boston Strangler? Could it have been a different turn of events that led to the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more unsolved cases. As always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.